Hey everyone, I'm Ellison Mars. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening.
I will do everything I can to ensure that the former president never again gets anywhere near the Oval Office. We have seen the danger that he continues to provoke with his language. We have seen his lack of commitment and dedication to the Constitution. And I think it's very important that we make sure whomever we elect is somebody who will be faithful to the Constitution.
Down but not out, Congresswoman Liz Cheney, no longer a Republican leader, but not giving up her fight against President Trump.
Domestic violent extremists pose an elevated threat in 2021. And in the FBI's view, the top domestic violent extremist threat we face comes from racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically those who advocate for the superiority of the white race.
Attorney General Merrick Garland talking to the Senate about domestic violent extremism. What else he told the Appropriations Committee about the threat to our nation. And in the Middle East, more than 50 people dead, hundreds injured during Israeli and Palestinian rocket attacks overnight. Are the two sides headed for war? We start this hour on Capitol Hill, where NBC News correspondent Garrett Hake has the latest on Liz Cheney. All right, Garrett, she is no longer a Republican leader. Tell us about that vote and what is next for Cheney.
Well, the vote was a pretty simple affair, a voice vote. No recorded totals here, making it clear that Cheney was out as conference chair with a fairly overwhelming number of Republicans voting against her. But she's not going quietly. That clip you played in the open was from a press conference she held immediately after the vote. And she spoke to our own Savannah Guthrie for an interview for the Today Show, in which she made it clear she intends to stay in this fight to reclaim the Republican Party from Donald Trump. Here's what she told Savannah earlier today.
Are you the leader of the opposition in exile right now in the Republican Party?
I intend to be the leader, one of the leaders in a fight to help to restore our party, in a fight to bring our party back to substance and principles, and in a fight to make clear that we won't participate in a really dangerous effort that's underway.
A lot of people frame this as a battle for the soul of the Republican Party.
This is the, I think, opening salvo in that battle. And it's a battle we have to win because it's not just about the Republican Party. It's about the country.
The Trump political team is actively looking to coalesce around a primary challenger to you. What is your message to them?
Bring it on.
Bringing on the message to a primary challenger. Cheney already has several. The idea here for the Trump folks is to whittle that list down so that perhaps in a one-on-one matchup she could be defeated in a primary. Look, she's got her tough road ahead. She has lost her leadership role. She still has a famous political last name, and she still has, at least for now, a microphone with which she can continue her task here.
Yeah, Garrett, if she's ruffled or she's rattled, she's certainly not showing it. She seems like she's dedicated to moving forward. So let's talk about who could replace her. Elise Stefanik officially launching her bid to become the House Republican Conference Chair. When do you expect a vote there? And is anyone else in the running?
I think we'll see a vote by the end of this week, probably on Friday morning. And if you'd asked me this question an hour ago, the answer would have been no, definitively. Stefanik has all the right endorsements, it would seem, including former President Trump and Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. But just within the last couple of hours, we've started to hear some bubbling up about some conservatives frustrated with what looks like a coronation for Stefanik. And there's been some talk that someone from the House Freedom Caucus, possibly Texas Representative Chip Roy, could jump in to challenge her to at least turn this into a race and not have it be one person essentially anointed for this role. Stay tuned for more on that, Allison.
Garrett, more than 100 Republicans are threatening to leave the GOP and form a third party. It is not the first time we have heard that kind of talk. What's going on today?
Yeah, look, the effort to peel off from the Republican Party or to form some kind of more powerful anti-Trump faction or super PAC or subgroup within the party has been much discussed, much reported on, but it's generated fairly little of any real electoral value. You're not seeing these anti-Trump Republicans get elected. You haven't seen any of them formally leave the party and then actually run for an office so far. And the pro-Trump Republican factions don't seem particularly concerned about it, as we heard from a couple of Republican members earlier this morning. Take a listen.
The notion that 5% of the Republican Party is going to eviscerate the influence of President Trump in the party never was plausible. And it was never good. It's not good for the Republican Party. It's not good for the country.
It's Dan Bishop of North Carolina. A little tough to make out behind his mask there, but his general math, I think, is probably right. The idea that maybe 5% of the Republican Party could take on the other 95% and win is pretty tough sledding, but these Republican apostates seem dedicated to trying.
Garrett, it is wild to think the House wasn't even around until last night. There has been a lot going on already this week. Thank you so much.
Tell me about it.
She is no longer a Republican leader, but she is still a Wyoming congresswoman. So how much support does Liz Cheney have in her home state today? NBC News correspondent Cal Perry is in Jackson, Wyoming. All right, Cal, you're in one of the bluer counties in Wyoming. President Biden won there by 67%. So what are people saying about the House Republicans' vote to remove Cheney as conference chair today? What do they think of what's going on?
Yeah, it's a blue dot in a red sea, right? Jackson is sort of liberal. The rest of the state leans conservative. Obviously, Liz Cheney is the representative from here, and she's a conservative Republican. When you talk to Democrats, they're of two minds. The one mind is let the Republican Party do this, let them kind of stumble around. The other mind is we really wish we had a party that was an opposition party that was reasonable and that we could debate with. And that's sort of what we're hearing here. The other thing that's unfolding is Liz Cheney, as you heard there from Garrett Hague, is going to stand for re-election in a year and a half. It's quite likely she comes home and she turns to Democrats for support in what is an open primary. Take a listen. Do you think they made a mistake in voting her out of leadership?
I do. I think that they are pushing to a more extremist view and alienating a lot of centrist Republicans that I think the Democratic Party could pick up.
Are you a Democratic Liz Cheney supporter now?
Oh, no. I mean, Liz Cheney and I agree on virtually nothing when it comes to policy. But damn it, she's doing the right thing.
I just think people are going to look back on this and say, wow, what, did we really do that? And I don't understand how the party can continue to go forward operating with Trump as the end all.
It's really a moment in many ways of political realignment here in the state. The other thing you heard there from Garrett Hague, which I think is going to be a big part of what happens here, is who runs against Liz Cheney. Does the president, former President Donald Trump, put in somebody who is to the right of her, who is seen as more extreme than she is, and does that force Democrats to make their ways to the polls, especially in the primary, Allison?
So, Cal, how about Republicans? The Wyoming GOP censured Cheney in February for voting to impeach Trump. What's their take on all this?
Look, and I now think you have sort of two different types of Republicans in the state of Wyoming. You have Republicans who support Donald Trump, and then you have sort of conservative Republicans or people that would consider themselves conservative who are now maybe moderate. And you find those folks, especially here in places like Jackson. We spoke to them as well. Do take a listen.
I'm really disturbed by the leadership, the Republican leadership in Congress. I don't get it. Because Liz is someone I really respect, who's voted over 90% with Trump.
There is a faction in the state that believes that there is one true ideology, and if you do not adhere to that, then you do not belong in the party. I don't see how you win elections when you're excluding people from your party.
We have certainly arrived in a very strange place when Liz Cheney supporters are now considering themselves moderate Republicans, Allison.
Yeah, that's for sure. Cal, the politics there are ugly, but man, that background is gorgeous. You couldn't pick a better place, better background, more beautiful site than Jackson, Wyoming. Wow.
That's right. Yep, that's exactly right.
You agree with your predecessors that white supremacist extremists remain the most persistent lethal threat in the homeland?
I do believe they do at this time, Mr. Chairman.
And Attorney General Garland, do you agree?
I do, and that's the most recent assessment of the FBI.
Attorney General Merrick Garland, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas talking domestic terrorism on the Hill today. NBC News correspondent Julia Ainsley is here with the latest on that Senate Appropriations Committee hearing. Julia, Mayorkas and Garland both adding resources to fight domestic violent extremism. What did AG Garland say about how the DOJ will deal with this growing threat?
Well, in part, they're asking for $100 million over that in the next fiscal year's budget from the Biden administration, specifically to get the Department of Justice, U.S. attorneys' offices, and the FBI investigating and preventing these domestic violent extremist acts. As you've heard them say over and over again, it's the most, especially from white supremacists, the most lethal and persistent threat facing the U.S. today. That's what Garland continued to harp on. He also said that they're starting investigations into how they vet DOJ employees to see if there's anyone within the fabric of the department who might pose a risk. It's similar to what's happening over at Mayorkas' agency, Department of Homeland Security, where they are doing an investigation as well to see if possibly there could be social media posts, if there's anything that indicates people they have working for them do have, beliefs or tendencies that may cause them to act violently. Now, it's okay for them to hold their own beliefs, but if they think that that could lead to violence or bias them in their work, then they want to do something about that. And today, the Attorney General said that they wanted to look at their vetting process to prevent that from happening.
Julia, DHS is adding an entirely new domestic extremism division. What do we know about what that will do specifically?
That's right, Allison. And this is in addition to other news that they've come out with recently saying that they're monitoring social media to try to look at emerging trends, such as those that led to January 6th. Now, they also are starting this new office for the Center for Community Partnerships and Prevention. This is to try to prevent domestic violent extremism before it happens. It's actually the latest iteration of an effort that started under the Obama administration, when the biggest threat then were homegrown jihadis. They tried to intercept at that point. Now it's really turned into domestic violence, and they expect that $77 million of grants from that office will go specifically to stopping domestic violent extremism.
All right, Julia Ainsley, always great to see you. Thank you so much. The Big Four at the White House for the first time today. President Biden hosting the top congressional Democrats and Republicans in the Oval Office to talk about his $2 trillion infrastructure bill. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli is with me now. Mike, you described this meeting as high stakes, low expectations. What are you hearing from the White House? How did it go?
Well, Allison, typically a meeting between the president, the vice president, and the so-called Big Four, the speaker and the majority leader in the Senate, and the minority leader in the House and Senate on the Republican side, would be the biggest meeting of a week, a month, potentially a year. But it's a measure of the state of Washington right now that this meeting today pales in comparison to the one-on-one meetings he's having with Democratic Senators Manchin and Sinema this week, as well as the big meeting with Republican senators tomorrow, including Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia. But there was a lot of talk afterwards from both sides about common agreement about doing infrastructure. The big question, of course, is how to pay for it and just how big it's going to be. Now, Lawrence O'Donnell interviewed the president a few hours after that meeting, and he gave a little bit of a window into how the president, that is, sees a bipartisan path forward. Take a listen.
Did you have an exploration of possible revenue with them, actual pay for it?
No, I didn't get into that. I get into what constitutes infrastructure. And I want to make it clear. I want to get a bipartisan deal on as much as we can get a bipartisan deal on. And that means roads, bridges, broadband, all infrastructure. But I'm not giving up on the fact that we have, 2 million women not able to go back to work because all the daycare centers are closed. They're out of business. And so they can't go back to work. I'm not going to give up on a whole range of things that go to the question of productivity, of increasing jobs, increasing employment, increasing revenues. I'm not really going to give up on that. So we're going to fight those out. So I want to know what can we agree on? And let's see if we can get an agreement, kickstart this, and then fight over what's left and see if I can get it done without Republicans if need be.
So, Allison, it sounds like there's been a lot of talk about breaking his American Jobs plan into smaller pieces to see if something can get bipartisan support. It sounds like the president is on board with that, but there are still a lot of ifs to get to that point. And so that's why it was also notable that when the Republican leaders came out, both Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, both of them drew a very strong red line about raising taxes, or undoing any part of the Trump tax bill from 2017. And so those pay-for discussions are going to continue to be critical in the days ahead.
Mike, we also know President Biden is addressing vaccinations this afternoon. How are we doing on his goal of at least one shot for 70% of American adults by July 4th?
Well, if you look at the pace that we're on right now, of course, the pace of vaccinations has dipped somewhat from its peak a few weeks ago. It's unlikely, without a major change in direction, that the president will see that 70% by July 4th, which is his goal. But a big development that might change that is what the president wanted to focus on today, and that is the CDC echoing the FDA and green-lighting the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, for adolescents, those aged 12 to 15. The president said this was an important development because, as he reminded, even those teenagers may not be suffering the same kind of health effects, even if they do contract it, but they can continue to spread it to others. And so he encouraged parents to take their children to get vaccinated. He noted that a lot of the pharmacy sites that the government has partnered with are just as close to anybody's home as their school is. And so clearly the White House, as the president likes to do at least once a week, giving an update on this pace of vaccination. And the president was happy to have some good news to talk about in the expanding age group that's now eligible.
Mike, I think we're all happy to have some good news to talk about these days. That is for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thanks, Allison.
And you can catch Lawrence O'Donnell's full interview with President Biden tonight during Vaccinating America. That starts at 10 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC.
The United States remains committed to a two-state solution. This violence takes us further away from that goal. We'll continue to engage with Israelis, Palestinians, and other regional partners to urge de-escalation and to bring calm.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken there earlier today addressing the violence in the Middle East. Airstrikes and missile launches killing at least 53 people in Gaza and at least 7 in Israel. One UN official warning the Israelis and the Palestinians could be escalating toward a full-blown war. The violence in that region, the worst it has been in 7 years. Israel announcing that its defense forces targeted and killed several senior Hamas commanders. NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter joins me now from London. Molly, the news here just coming in fast and furious. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu congratulating the Israeli defense forces for that targeted attack on Hamas in the Gaza Strip. What else can you tell us about what happened there?
Yeah, it was a pretty extraordinary video. It happened about 2 hours ago, and it was a 14-story building. It's the tallest building kind of in this part of Gaza, mostly full of media offices, including the media offices of the Hamas-run TV station Al-Aqsa. And there were warning missile strikes, and then, Allison, an Israeli airstrike took the entire building down. And that is the video that Prime Minister Netanyahu tweeted, and he congratulated the IDF on that. Allison, I also want to say, and this happened to us last night, too, we just got new numbers. So actually, the numbers are already outdated in your intro. We just learned that 65 people in Gaza have been killed, including 16 children.
Molly, I feel like that's just a testament to what's going on there. Every time I see you on TV, whether it's with us, MSNBC, it seems like those numbers just keep changing so quickly. I understand the Israeli cabinet is meeting tonight about potentially expanding the military operation in Gaza. What can you tell us about that?
That's exactly right. So the cabinet was set to meet tonight. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was speaking earlier today, and he said that was the plan. He also was very clear, Allison, that the Israeli military is not backing down. The IDF spokesperson was very clear that this would intensify. The defense minister, Benny Gantz, was also very clear that this was just the start of this. So I think that if we do hear anything after that cabinet meeting tonight, it will be that the Israeli military and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's administration is not ready to back down. Also, about an hour ago, Allison, we heard from Mahmoud Abbas, Palestinian President Abbas, and he was very strong. And he said, enough is enough. He said, please leave us alone, Israel and the United States. But there was absolutely no language of reconciliation, of ceasefire, of de-escalation from either side, Allison.
Molly, we're also hearing some breaking news in several Israeli cities. There are reportedly protests, mobs attacking each other. What do you know? What's going on there?
This is coming in literally as we're going on the air. We've just gotten a report from our producer on the ground, Allison. Of course, all week I've been in London. We have a great team there who's feeding us back information in real time. So last night, what we saw, Allison, across multiple Israeli cities, mixed Israeli cities, so Jewish Israelis live there as well as Palestinian citizens of Israel. We saw the biggest street protest that we have seen in 20 years. And so that was kind of hit a fever pitch last night. Prime Minister Netanyahu this morning talking, he called it anarchy this morning. He said he would not be afraid to rule with an iron fist. Tonight, what we're seeing sounds even more dangerous. It sounds like mobs are literally out. And the word that was used in our reporting, Allison, was lynching. Both sides are lynching people from the other side. Now, we do have a statement from the Israeli police foreign press spokesperson who says police units are continuing to respond to violent incidents that have taken place in Acre, Lod, and the Bar Yam area. Those are three cities similar to what I just described. Units responding quickly to incidents on the streets and in neighborhoods to prevent further major incidents. Again, these are the biggest protests that we've seen. And this is something, while we're talking about Gaza, we really have to keep our eyes on some of these Israeli cities inside Israel. Allison?
Yeah, it is just incredible what's going on there and how things are changing so quickly. Molly, thank you to you for staying on top of it. And of course, to your great team you mentioned in Israel and Gaza for reporting on what's going on. We really appreciate all that you're doing. All right, it's time to go to NBC News Now. Correspondent Simone Boyce. She has the latest headlines from NBCnews.com. Hi, Simone.
Hey, Allison, we're going to kick things off today with news from the UK. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announcing an inquiry next year into the handling of the pandemic. Johnson says it will likely focus on why the UK was so slow to initially impose a lockdown and why it suffered the worst death toll in Europe. Well, in Texas, the U.S. Coast Guard is searching for a 7-year-old boy who disappeared on a Galveston beach last night while visiting with family. KPRC, our NBC affiliate in Houston, is reporting that the child got caught in a rip current, but that has not yet been confirmed by the Coast Guard. And in New Jersey, a Hindu temple is being accused of luring Indian men from marginalized communities to the U.S. and forcing them to work nearly 90 hours a week for $1 an hour. 6 of the workers filing the lawsuit saying at least 200 Indian nationals were victims of forced labor, trafficking, and wage theft. Well, Instagram introducing a new feature allowing users to include their pronouns in a specific section of their profile. Users can choose from a variety of pronouns, including he, him, she, her, and they, them, which will appear in small gray letters right next to their usernames. And it is the end of an era in daytime television. Ellen DeGeneres is ending her talk show after the upcoming 19th season in 2022. She told The Hollywood Reporter, quote, "When you're a creative person, you constantly need to be challenged. And as great as this show is and as fun as it is, it's just not a challenge anymore." Now, Ellen has hosted this show since 2003. Really kind of hard to believe, right, Allison? But at the same time, what she said, her rationalization behind this, I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Daytime TV is certainly going to be different with Ellen, without Ellen. But, girl, I don't know anybody who does anything for 19 years anymore. So good for her. On to the next challenge, that's for sure.
Seriously. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you, Simone. The CDC giving the thumbs up to the Pfizer vaccine for kids 12 to 15, an advisory panel voting to recommend the shot for that age group today. But Georgia didn't wait for the CDC. That state started giving the shot to adolescents yesterday, a day after the FDA said that age group was eligible. They just needed a signed consent form from a parent or a guardian. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber is at a vaccination site in Stonecrest, Georgia. Ellison, I understand Georgia has one of the lowest vaccination rates in the entire country. No doubt that played a role here, but tell us more about the state's decision.
Yeah, so, I mean, in Georgia, only about 30% of Georgians are fully vaccinated. 36% have had at least one dose of a Pfizer vaccine. So, yeah, they are low on the list when you look at other states, and they absolutely want to get those numbers up. At least the Department of Public Health here wants to do that. And they say that this age group, 12 to 15, is a really important piece of that puzzle. But as you said, they made the decision here to start this early. Georgia was one of 3 states, Delaware and Arkansas are the other 2, that decided to go ahead and allow 12 to 15-year-olds to get vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine if they showed up at a site with parental consent. They did not wait for that CDC advisory board to meet, and they obviously confirmed the ruling, the decision of the FDA on Monday. But a couple other factors that also seem to have played into Georgia's decision to move ahead with that was the desire to just get as many people vaccinated as possible. As you mentioned, as we just discussed, they do have lower vaccination rates in this state compared to others. Want to get as many people vaccinated. There's also the fact that the FDA emergency use authorization that was announced on Monday, that was an amended EUA. They took the Pfizer EUA that had been passed, authorized in December, and they added to that this age range from 12 to 15. The amount of vaccines given to this age group, the 2 doses, none of that changed. So there already was a CDC advisory board that had met after that authorization. So there was guidance already out there. It was largely expected that the CDC would do what they did. So that's also another reason why Georgia was like, hey, let's go ahead and just do this. One other reason that we've heard is they said they were worried that once that news came out from the FDA, if teens showed up to get vaccinated and were told, hey, no, not today, come back in 24 or 48 hours, that they might not actually come back. And given the low rate of vaccination in this state, obviously they didn't want to miss an opportunity to vaccinate anyone if they wanted to get vaccinated. A day, 2 days in a pandemic, it matters. Allison?
Yeah, it sure does. Smart move there. Why wait and why send people home when they're eager to get a shot? Certainly when you're having trouble getting people vaccinated. So what are you hearing, Ellison, from parents who are bringing their kids to get vaccinated today? How are they feeling about all this?
You know, we talked to 3 different moms in the last 24 hours or so. And one thing that all of them talked about was they said that they know when they're looking at the numbers that for their child, perhaps COVID-19 is not as serious as it is, say, for the elderly or someone with a pre-existing condition. But they said when they were looking at the options, they felt like it was riskier for their children to possibly get COVID-19 than to get the vaccine. And knowing that, once they say they'd done that research, they felt like they had no choice and they really wanted to make sure their kids got vaccinated as soon as possible. Here's what one mom told us just a little while ago.
I guess because I was vaccinated and I didn't have any problems at all except for like a minor irritation rash. I really felt that they should do it too, because I think it's more important for them to be vaccinated than for them to actually get it and get even sicker.
So that mom brought her entire household to get vaccinated here this afternoon, ranging in ages from 15 to 35, her 3 children, as well as her godson. She said she just wanted everyone to get vaccinated. She did it. She felt fine. She said that this is the right choice for her family. Allison.
Ellison, I love it. Round everybody up, get them in the car, go get them vaccinated, get it done all in one shot. How about the kids? What are you hearing from them? How do they feel about being able to get a COVID shot?
Yeah, I mean, some of the kids we've tried to talk to, they're teenagers. And so when I say, are you excited? You're kind of the first to go in this age group in the United States. They're like, hey, yeah, sort of. But everyone has told me that they are happy to get the vaccine within this age group and that this is something that they feel like it will kind of open up some doors for them and maybe make them feel a little bit safer. I'll let you listen to what they had to say, but pay attention to the first 2 children. That's the 2 of the 3 children that the mom you just heard from brought to this vaccination site today. The first person you'll hear from, that's the brother. Okay. He's 19. The second person, his 15-year-old sister. Listen to this.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I know they see me and, I'm going to give them a shot and it's not going to feel like anything. So I know when they see me do stuff, they're like, oh, that's my big brother. So I could do the same thing too, make them just feel good.
Get vaccinated. It doesn't hurt. It's going to help. It's going to help the world step close to normal.
As soon as I am fully vaccinated, I'm having the sleepover at my friend's house. So I think that's one of the, and then probably the movie theaters, because I haven't been to the movie theaters in over a year.
Going to the movie theaters is the one that I have heard the most from kids we've talked to who have now been vaccinated as the thing that they are most looking forward to doing, just going to the movie theater with some friends. Allison.
Allison, I'm in my 40s and I can't wait to go to the movies with some friends. I'm here. I'm here with them. I get it. I understand where they are coming from, right? Like, it seems like such a strange thing. You drive past and all the movie theaters are closed. Definitely looking forward to that. And thank you. Even though their enthusiasm may have been muted, you could tell they're pretty psyched to see their friends again. Thanks so much.
You bet.
Primary care doctors and pediatricians in West Virginia ready to give their patients the COVID shot right in their office. NBC News correspondent Heidi Prisbilla is in Morgantown.
States like West Virginia were actually doing pretty well with vaccinations, but more recently, they've hit a wall. At about 35% of the population vaccinated, now the state is consulting a behavioral scientist to find out how to talk to people about getting vaccinated. And what they're finding is that in smaller, more tight-knit rural areas like this, what you say, how you talk about the vaccine, and even the messenger really matter. Take a listen.
So the other thing that our data shows is that while you would think you want celebrities and sports figures, and they're going to be somewhat important. But what the data is showing us is most of these people want medical professionals to tell them it's okay. And in particular, people want trusted medical professionals, meaning people they're familiar with. So a primary care provider. Maybe they go to an urgent care on a regular basis. That's the place they go when they have an issue, and there's a doctor in there that maybe is not their primary provider, but is the person that they're familiar with.
This week, doctors are beginning to receive their first doses of the vaccine to distribute and vaccinate individuals in the clinic. That is a very important development here in West Virginia, based on the data that the vaccine coordinator and doctors are telling NBC News that many people are just waiting for their doctors to say to them, it's okay. And that is true of both older individuals who have some questions, as well as parents who are now going to be on the front lines making the decisions about whether their children who are now eligible get vaccinated. Take a listen to what this doctor had to say.
We know that many people have questions. We want those discussions to happen as a physician, and we want to have that trusted conversation and provide the facts that we know about the vaccine so that individuals can make those decisions. Particularly in a rural state like ours, people trust their local health professional, and by having access at their office, individuals will have that discussion and then say, you know, this is the right decision for me and my family. I'm going to choose to be vaccinated.
And what she had to say really gels with what the data is telling the vaccine coordinators, as well as the doctors who are looking at this, which is that in states like this, they don't want to go to places that are called mass vaccination clinics. This is really about person-to-person, one-on-one individual interactions that will get people to get it vaccinated. And here in West Virginia, we were told that just last Sunday, there was a call to the vaccine coordinator, for instance, from a doctor in Charleston who said, when am I going to get those doses? It's just going to take me about 15 minutes to sit down with each of my patients and explain to them why they need to do this. And he said that he actually had a wait list of individuals who preferred to get the vaccine from their doctors and not at a mass vaccination clinic.
They are calling it an execution. Andrew Brown Jr.'s family talking about the nearly 19 minutes of body cam footage they've now seen from the night Brown was killed by sheriff's deputies. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck is in North Carolina with the latest.
Well, Allison, as Brown's family were going in to watch the video yesterday, they were asked what they expected they would see. And they said an unjustified police shooting. When they came out, they said that's in fact what they did see. They described what stands in contrast to what the district attorney described that happened in that incident. They say Mr. Brown never actually made contact with police with his vehicle. They said he was sitting with his hands on the steering wheel in a non-threatening way when officers began firing. Now, the district attorney had said in open court that Mr. Brown reversed and moved forward, making contact with deputies twice. The family was pretty definitive in saying that is not what they saw on the tape.
At no point did we ever see any police officers behind his vehicle. At no point did we ever see Mr. Brown make contact with law enforcement. We were able to see where they possibly reached out to make contact to him, but we did not see any actions on Mr. Brown's part where he made contact with them or tried to go in their direction. In fact, he did just the opposite.
Brown's attorneys are also asking that the district attorney recuse himself from this case, saying that he has personal relationships with all of the officers who were involved in this incident, and specifically the 3 who fired their guns. Now, 3 remain on administrative leave. 4 officers have actually returned back to work. As for the public release of this video, there really is no timetable on when we will get a look at the full tape. A judge said that he would review the possibility of release within 30 or 45 days, checking in with the State Bureau of Investigation so not to jeopardize the case. Allison?
Juanisha Brooks feared for her life when Virginia state troopers pulled her over on March 6th. Police dash cam video shows those officers approaching Brooks's car. When the 34-year-old black woman asked why they stopped her, one trooper said, "Can you step outside and I'll show you?" Brooks stayed in her car until she was dragged out and handcuffed. Now a state prosecutor says this never should have happened. NBCNews.com national reporter Janelle Griffith joins me now. Janelle, that prosecutor says that there was no legal basis for this traffic stop. What else did he say about what happened early that morning?
So he told me that it's, quote, sickening and unacceptable that a member of the community would fear for their safety during a routine traffic stop. And the reason why he said that there was no legal basis for the traffic stop in the first place is because just days before, on March 1st, the Virginia General Assembly banned pulling people over for dark taillights, which was one of the reasons the state trooper had claimed he had stopped Ms. Brooks. And the reason why the General Assembly had banned it is because they said that it led to pretextual traffic stops that can cause unnecessary conflict for otherwise law-abiding citizens. Now, we also know that from a national perspective, these types of pretextual traffic stops, when they're analyzed, they tend to disproportionately affect Black and Latino people, and they're often applied in poorer neighborhoods. So that's also a reason why some states are trying to do away with pretextual traffic stops in the first place.
Janelle, that prosecutor, Steve Descano, wants the Virginia State Police to open an internal affairs investigation. What specifically does he want them to look into there?
So he wants them to look into the entire incident from top to bottom. So the reasoning why she was even pulled over, how it was handled, how it was documented in the arrest report, because there were discrepancies between what the dash cam video showed and what was documented into the arrest report. And also the charges that she faced, because again, the prosecutor said that there was no justification for why she was even facing these charges or pulled over in the first place.
Any official response, statement, anything from the Virginia State Police?
So I spoke to the state police, and they said that the trooper acted appropriately. They said that he had observed Ms. Brooks driving without headlights or taillights on, that they had observed her tailgating and switching lanes inappropriately or erratically. But what's interesting is that the prosecutor said that she had not been, he reviewed the arrest report and the dash cam video, and he found that she had not been in violation of any tail light or headlight statutes.
Wow. We'll also see what that investigation finds. Janelle, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Derek Chauvin could face a longer prison sentence for murdering George Floyd. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez explains the new ruling from a judge today.
Allison, good afternoon. That Minnesota judge has ruled that there were aggravating factors present when Derek Chauvin knelt on George Floyd's neck for about 9.5 minutes, and that essentially kicks up his sentence during his, he's scheduled to be sentenced in late June. But Judge Cahill of Minnesota ruled that Derek Chauvin abused his authority as a police officer, and that he treated George Floyd with particular cruelty. Also, that he committed the crime in the presence of a child, a 9-year-old, of course, that testified during that trial. And what that essentially means, Allison, is that Chauvin now faces up to 40 years in prison. If these aggravating factors had not been present, if a judge had not ruled this way, he probably would have gotten an average of 12 and a half years on that most serious charge. Chauvin, of course, being convicted just weeks ago of second-degree murder as well as third-degree murder and manslaughter as well. Now he will be sentenced in late June. Legal experts, though, they believe that he very likely won't get the full 40 years, that he could potentially get less than 30 years with good behavior. Now, Chauvin also faces federal civil rights charges that were announced last week. If he were convicted on those charges, he would serve that sentence at the same time as these state charges. And of course, Allison, there are 3 other officers involved in this case. They're set to go to trial on the state charges later on this summer in August.
It is time for The Bottom Line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. Today, we're talking consumer prices and inflation, but let's start with the markets because, woo, what a mess. Check this out. The Dow closed down 681 points today. That is its worst day since January. It's down about 1,150 points in just 2 days. Why? You got it. Inflation. Consumer prices for April out today. They are up more than 4% since last year. That is the quickest spike since 2008. So what's going on here? Well, there's some good news. The good news is that increase was so high because we're coming off a really low base. Back in April of 2020, the pandemic was blowing up and inflation was really low. So that's the good news. The bad news, the Consumer Price Index looks at a bunch of things that people buy, plus energy and housing prices, and it determines how much they've gone up in a year. In April of 2021, all of those things were way up. But the bottom line here, this is likely just temporary, and if it is, we're okay. If it's not, the Fed may need to get involved. So watch this space. We will keep you posted, and we'll have producer prices tomorrow. General Motors is going all electric by 2035, but it is also going outside the U.S. The automaker is announcing plans to invest $1 billion in an electric vehicle plant in Mexico. NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman is in Flint, Michigan. Josh, Flint is known as Vehicle City. At one point, half of the population there worked for GM. I know you've been speaking with auto workers in the city. They cannot be happy about that announcement.
The United Auto Workers called it a slap in the face, and the auto workers that we've been speaking with says it feels like that. They say that it feels like a continuation of the tens of thousands of jobs that have left Flint over the last many decades, and they worry that more of these jobs will be going to countries like China and Myanmar, in addition to Mexico, as GM transitions to all electric. They told us that they are concerned, especially as GM is trying to get all of this credit for going green. And they say they support GM going green, but that it shouldn't happen at their expense. Take a listen. In just a word or two, when you heard that GM was going to spend all this money to build electric vehicles, not here, but in Mexico, how did that make you feel, Beth?
Insecure.
Chris?
I was disappointed.
Disappointed. What about you, Brett?
Shameful.
Shameful. Tell me about that.
So I worked at Delphi. I hired in at Delphi and seen what product investment to Mexico does to a community like Flint, Michigan that we live in. And it's for General Motors to ask for the bailout and for American taxpayers to be there for General Motors in a time of need. It's a time of need for American workers, and to not get this investment is shameful.
Those workers also told us that it's particularly egregious for GM to be doing this at the same time, Allison, that they are asking the federal government for billions in taxpayer-funded subsidies for Americans to be buying these same electric vehicles that they're going to be making in Mexico.
So, Josh, what are you hearing from GM about all this?
Well, GM says this is just a sliver of their overall investments in electric vehicles. They say they're actually spending $9 billion on EV facilities here in the U.S., including in Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee. And they say it'll come with 9,000 jobs with it. And a GM official told me, look, we're a global automaker. We make cars all over the world. And so if we're going to go all electric, it only makes sense that some of those vehicles are going to be made outside of the U.S. Allison?
All right, Josh Letterman in Flint, Michigan. Thank you so much. Long lines at gas stations up and down the East Coast thanks to the Colonial Pipeline hack. And that gas isn't cheap. The average now over $3 a gallon for the first time in almost 7 years. NBC News senior national correspondent Tom Yamas is in Charlotte, North Carolina, where drivers are frustrated.
Allison, good afternoon. 7 out of 10 gas stations here in Charlotte don't have gas right now, and it's affecting all types of drivers, even these commercial truck drivers. The big rig operators tell me that if they don't get their fuel soon, their deliveries are going to be delayed. This line snakes all around the block into the highway, and it's because this is one of the few gas stations in Charlotte that has fuel right now. It's a much different story around other parts of the Southeast.
Gas and patience running low at the pump.
I have been here now for an hour and 15 minutes.
Emergency declarations issued in 4 states, with more than 1,700 gas stations from Florida to Maryland out of fuel. It comes on the heels of that crippling cyber attack against a critical U.S. fuel source.
All the gas stations closer to where I live were completely empty.
Americans up and down the East Coast on the hunt for gas, overwhelming some stations.
Do you think people are panicked, or do you think people are just kind of trying to figure everything out?
I think it's probably some panic, like the toilet paper issues a year ago.
Cars bumper to bumper here in the Carolinas and stretching down streets in Florida.
Check out the line.
Nationwide, gas prices reaching their highest point in nearly 7 years. Despite the spike in price and demand, the White House and experts are preaching calm.
Don't be hoarding gas. If you don't really need it, then don't buy it.
But with the Colonial Pipeline still mostly down, the region that relies on the 5,500-mile system for its fuel is feeling an impact.
My fear is you have these gas shortages. It's going to cause a lot of problems for people.
At some stations in South Carolina on Tuesday, cars were turned away.
We're out of gas.
And according to Gas Buddy, nearly 60% of the gas stations in metro Atlanta are out of fuel. But these pumps in Tennessee had plenty.
As of right now, there's still a good supply out there, and there's no need to panic.
The long lines, though, already causing a domino effect in some cases.
You want to get groceries, but you can't get groceries. Why?
Because I cannot. Look, you see the line.
All of this pain at the pump as 34 million Americans plan to buckle up and hit the road for the big Memorial Day weekend.
The other major headline happening today, the price of an average gallon of gas going up to $3 for the first time in 7 years.
Zoom conference calls in classrooms, family FaceTimes, TikTok dance challenges. They've really helped us through this pandemic. But is all that screen time putting us at a higher risk of internet addiction? NBC Nightly News anchor Lester Holt takes a look.
In our pandemic isolation, the internet became a lifeline, but for others, a life-altering portal to what some describe as a rabbit hole. Scott Zayed says he's been down it.
I would imagine it's like what any addiction feels like. You think about actually giving it up.
Zayed's found himself spending more and more time online. In his case, feeding an insatiable appetite for politics. The election and Capitol siege particularly drew him in.
Does it feel like you're just being swept down this tunnel?
Yeah. They cycle the things that you want to see, or they know what you want to read, and so they feed you more and more of that. So I know I feed into it, right? I know it's happening, and yet I still click and open that next article.
Psychiatrist Dr. Howard Foreman says internet addiction is real.
Just based on the volume of calls that I'm getting, volume of calls that my colleagues are getting, it is certainly growing. And I think we're going to see that this emerges as one of the major behavioral addictions in the United States.
Though published research in the U.S. is scarce, overseas studies have noted sharp increases in internet dependence during the pandemic, with links to anxiety and depression.
I've had to go on blood pressure medicine.
Scientifically, what is happening when we cross this line on the computer into addiction?
Every time that you get a like or a follow or someone comments on something that you've posted, you get a surge of dopamine in a part of the brain that we call in layman's terms the pleasure center. And it gets very addicting once you get more and more of this surge of pleasure.
Attempts to stop cold, he says, generally fail.
The therapy that I always start with is that you start out with a simple do and a simple don't. And the simple do is do engage in activities that previously were pleasurable to you before the internet took over your life.
As for Scott, a healthcare worker, online disinformation and lies about COVID are still triggers.
I know it's happening, and yet I still click and open that next article.
A struggle between the healthy need to know and engage and the unhealthy fall into that rabbit hole. Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.